So I can pretty confidently say that the vast majority, the vast reason for these human crimes is financially motivated.
Yeah.
It's interesting. People used to say, hey, everything's financially motivated on the human crime list except for child sexual exploitation. And then I was at the United Nations just a couple months ago, and I was there for 2 days. I had a wonderful time speaking the second day. But the first day, I was being educated by experts from all around the world about how it's actually financially motivated. It's not just criminals that are just transacting for their own gratification, but actually there's rings and organized rings around monetizing this. It's terrible to say. And so these are financially motivated crimes.
Human trafficking doesn't always take the form we first imagine. It can be found at almost any level of an organization's supply chain. What can compliance professionals do to assess human trafficking risk, and how can they leverage the resources of the organizations they work for to help root out this tragic problem? Gwen Hassan is here to help. This is Hidden Traffic.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Hidden Traffic. I am your host, as always, Gwen Hassan. I'm very happy to have with me today Ian Mitchell. He is not only the founder, but also the board chair, is that right, of the Knoble?
That's right, Gwen. Thank you for the invitation. So happy to spend time with you today.
Sure. I'm really glad you could join me. So in full disclosure, I'm stealing Ian because I saw him speak on another webinar and was so impressed that I reached out and said, oh, he would be great to be on the podcast. So thanks for agreeing to join us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are, where you're talking to us from today, and how you kind of got into this line of work.
Well, first of all, thank you for, I don't know if it's courage or what it is to have platforms like this, because it's changed the way we communicate. And it's so important that we have this open dialogue on topics like this and so many others. And so just appreciate the forums that you've created. And thank you to all the listeners in advance for your attention. So I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I've lived in 5 countries and 13 states. I've lived all over, mostly major cities. When we were talking about Chicago, right before we got started here, I've lived in LA and Cincinnati twice and just down towards Miami. I mean, I've lived all over, mainly big cities. And about 7 years ago, I just decided to go and rewrite my story. And I moved down to the mountains of Chattanooga. I'm sitting here. I can look off of my back deck and just see a beautiful view just off of a brow. Just something that I never thought I'd do because I've been so city my whole life growing up in Singapore and Japan. And
Oh my gosh.
so I was scared to go out of my house. When we first moved here for the first 2 years at night, I didn't know.
Years of some
That's
kind, or-
exactly what I was. I'm such a city boy. It was just funny. All my friends that had any sort of country in them at all would just mock me, and I deserved every bit of it. And now I've gotten used to it and enjoy it. I've got a pond across the street, and it's filled with thousands of goldfish. I started with 25, and now there's thousands in there, and they eat all my fish food. And I just have enjoyed this country life. I guess I'm still not country, but I fake it, I guess. Okay. But I am a 25-year fraud fighter. I started my career off in the .com age, stumbled into some fraud. They let me start a fraud department, and then I've been with quite a few banks since and have been leading fraud and security departments around, I think it's over 14 countries. So I've been all over the world fighting fraud. It's a wonderful career. And now I find myself kind of in this new part of life.
I always say that people who work in this space, whether it's fraud or ethics and compliance, sometimes also HR, make the very best cocktail party guests because after a drink, they have some of the best and most unbelievable stories you ever hear. So I always love talking to people in this space. Yeah.
I do too. I love to hang out with people that can remember cases, the people that you expect to have jokes. That's never been me. And have a case, I struggle. That's just for whatever reason. But my goodness, on my teams, I would have some of the best investigators. I could share some of the amazing stories. And sometimes I can spit one out or two. But really, you're right. It is so much fun. We're so blessed to be in such a great career.
Agreed. So tell us a little bit about the Knoble. Where did it come from? What it's about? How did you decide to create it?
So the Knoble is a nonprofit organization. In about 2018, 19 time period, I had left Fifth Third Bank. I led fraud and security there for several years and just needed to do something different. So I moved down here. I wanted to focus on music. I've been writing and recording music for about 30 years, and I wanted to focus on that. So I moved down to the Nashville area, and I started thinking that I was moving into that side of my world. And while I was full steam ahead, focused on growing a hideous beard more than anything else, even worse than what I have today, I promise you, I met somebody who'd been fighting human trafficking for 3 decades. His name's Matt Friedman. Matt is a self-proclaimed activist. He's an inspiration of a human being, somebody I can call a friend. And I'm so fortunate to be able to say that. And he started talking to me. I met him at a mutual friend's house over a cup of coffee. And him and I just shared the coffee. And he started telling me about human trafficking. I knew nothing about it. And he was there to talk to banks, saying that banks needed to do more. He had no idea that I was a recovering banker at this point. I was a music hippie, is the way he described me. And I was full on skinny jeans and everything. But he started talking to me about it, and I started realizing that maybe I missed something. And to fast forward, that's the journey I was on for a better part of a year, is realizing that maybe whether it's human trafficking or scams, there was some mass gun violence, some active shooter stuff that was going on in the country. And I'm thinking, wow, there may be like some of the patterns I've seen in our data, fighting credit card fraud. Wow. I started thinking of all these scenarios where maybe there was more that we could do, or I
More
could.
to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Matt, by the way. He, the
Or,
very, very first guest on this podcast was Matt. So
Matt is, yeah.
we have that in common. He is amazing.
So Matt is to blame. Matt started it all. And so I cut the beard and I started put on normal jeans again. And I still haven't put down the guitar, but I worked with several people to start this nonprofit. The nonprofit's mission is to equip and unite, to create an alliance, a network across the industry of people just like I was, financial crime, fraud fighters, bankers, fintech providers. And just for me, what I would say is recognize there's human beings behind all the transactions. It's not just data for us. And we do such a great job of identifying anomalies and all these things and verifying transactions, and the resources we have to fight fraud and money laundering is unbelievable. But if we could, I would say, open our aperture just 5% or a degree, a percent, to me, it just becomes a situation where we can protect people. And so we call what we do fighting human crime. It's a term we came up with. It's actually somebody on our team. I was always listing, hey, I want to fight human trafficking and child exploitations and scam. And he said, Ian, let's call it what it is. Let's call it human crime. Let's put the human being at the center of it. And so that's where that came from. And so we are trying to unite the financial services industry through projects and initiatives to fight human trafficking, modern slavery, child exploitation, specifically the sexual exploitation of children, scams, which is something that was in dire need just a couple of years ago. There's been a lot of attention on it now, which I'm so excited for. But back in 18, 19, 16, nobody did anything on the scam side. It was a cost of business. And then elder exploitation, which there are state laws, but not a lot of robust programs at institutions around this. And there's been a lot of movement on that one too over the last couple of years, which I'm excited about. So that's what we do, is we're trying to unite the industry and create a network to fight those human crimes.
Let's talk about that a bit, because first of all, bravo. And I love whoever on your team brought the coalescence of all of those into the idea of human crime and stealing that.
Harry Shepard. Yeah, he welcomes it. Yeah, use it all.
Well, bravo to him. I want to talk a bit about what kind of strategies you see working in the fighting of human crime, because people may come at this from the thought that, well, those are all so different. Scams are one thing, but human trafficking is another thing. What's kind of the common core? Is it data? Is it money? Is it follow the money? Is that the issue? Where do you see kind of commonalities, and what strategies are you using to work with these institutions to fight?
So I can pretty commonly say that the vast reason for these human crimes is financially motivated. It's interesting. People used to say, hey, everything's financially motivated on the human crime list except for child sexual exploitation. And then I was at the United Nations just a couple months ago, and I was there for 2 days. I had a wonderful time speaking the second day. But the first day, I was being educated by experts from all around the world about how it's actually financially motivated. It's not just criminals that are just transacting for their own gratification, but actually there's rings and organized rings around monetizing this. It's terrible to say. And so these are financially motivated crimes. Now, because they're financially motivated, well, that's where financial institutions are amazing. We have the most robust banks or programs in place for fighting fraud and money laundering. And so that's the other synergy. So there's the financial motivation. And then there's a fact globally, like I told you, I've managed this in over 14 countries. I think the number is closer to 20. I just lose count. But you look at the ecosystem of our banking, and it's very similar across the world. There are some differences in credit bureaus. Some are positive and negative credit bureaus. Some are just negative. But when you talk about the rails, the processing, it's replicated across the world. And so we talk about the type of money movements. It's called different things. A lot of them have similar rails. And so this just becomes a situation where that's a nexus also, how we can scale our infrastructure. And then these programs, no matter what country you're in, most countries have programs requiring banks to do something to protect their customers on fraud and money laundering. So we have people. We have some of the best trained, equipped, and educated, knowledgeable, skilled people around the world that wake up my estimation, hundreds of thousands of them wake up every day to do verification of transactions for fraud. If we could get a handful of them, a percentage of them, to think about child exploitation or human trafficking, that's the army. I'll go one more thing. I know Matt Friedman would always say, Ian, we're only saving like, I think it's detecting 0.2% of all all human trafficking victims.
Yeah.
I asked him, what do we need? And he said, we need more resources. We spend more on a bag buying potato chips in the US than all the resources for human trafficking. And I started thinking about, well, instead of asking for the resources directly, the financial services has the resources. They're already in the transactions. And there's so many other types of sectors like technology that have them. But the resources and the people are already there.
You're
It's
just
now
leveraging what's existing.
that's
Yeah.
right.
It becomes a force multiplier, right? Because you're taking, I love this concept of building in instead of bolting on. So if you go to a group and say, hey, we want to fight this, let's build a new process and let's come up with a new solution, that's going to take more time, more resources, more energy. You're going to get more resistance than, hey, you're already doing X, Y, and Z. As you're doing that, watch out for this. And could we maybe insert here an extra check to look at something in an existing process you're leveraging and force multiplying? I like
And
that.
that's it. You did a great job of summarizing that better than I did. I tell you, that's what it is. That is how we're going to win this battle. That really is what it comes down to.
I know you said it's an alliance of
Yep.
different groups. What is the role of corporations in that alliance? Are there companies right now that are part of the alliance? And what is their role and what are they doing?
So yes, we have on a company side, and I should have started by saying that, but on the company side, we have corporate sponsors and members. So corporate sponsors and members do everything from, we have a corporate membership that model, and we have a project initiative sponsor. We do all of our projects and learnings as much as we can through initiatives.
Okay.
Because I always remember it's easier to learn when you actually get your hands dirty, when you actually learn, teach somebody how to fish, you fish next to them, right? That whole analogy that we all know.
Yeah.
So we do initiatives so that we can scale learning. And so our corporate members actually come in and support initiatives. They say, hey, we've got a heart for gift card. Walmart sponsored a project around gift card and scams. LexisNexis has sponsored several projects around human trafficking, for example. We have a early warning, and Guidehouse has sponsored roundtables on human traffic or scams. So they come in with what's important to them, and they help us kind of create these projects, initiatives, whatever it is, to just get everybody to learn together. That's what the corporate component is. I will tell you, while we have amazing corporate members like Fiserv and MasterCard and MVB, and the individuals is the part that excites me. We could have, for example, the largest banks in the country say, I'm buying in. But the way we win this is that the people that are sitting in compliance jobs today and detection jobs today and the investigators today, and if they do something, that's the way I believe it really scales. And so we have, I think it's almost 3,000 individual financial crime fighters, over 2,000 financial institutions.
Oh my
That's mind blowing. Last year, we had 561 volunteers out of a population. Not everybody has the time and the energy to build it, but they came in and they actually were part of projects, initiatives around the Super Bowl, and they come in and we learn together. It's not perfect. The Knoble doesn't sell data. We're not trying to build any solutions.
Yeah.
What we're trying to do is leverage what's in place today and get everyone to start. And so that's what we've done. And that's the exciting part. Membership on an individual basis is free. So it doesn't cost anything for an individual to go in and get trained and be a part of projects. Like the goal is to, again, create an alliance, like-minded people that want to come in and fight human crime in addition to their day job.
That's great. And what a neat way for people to feel like they can get involved, even if they're just starting out. I get asked all the time, hey, is there something that I could do? Is there a way that I could volunteer? What can I do in my own community? Now I know how to answer that. I'm going to send them your way. That's a great outlet. For people that are sitting in a corporation, like we were talking about, trying to figure out, okay, besides volunteering with the Knoble, what else can I do? Do you have any thoughts around kind of what a corporation's role should be in fighting human crime? Should it be obviously in a mini pitch becoming a sponsor for a Knoble initiative? I think that sounds like a great idea.
Thank you
But
for doing that.
beyond that, sure. Are there other things that a corporation should be doing in your view? And kind of from a corporate social responsibility standpoint, where do you think we're headed in that regard?
We're just rolling out something called the Knoble Accord is what it's called. And what it is, it's not saying I'm signing up for anything. It's coming in saying, we as an organization want to aspire to not allow human crime to happen in our world. It's not signing up to say, I'm going to spend millions of dollars to fight human trafficking, but it's saying, I'm supportive of this because there's people in all these. And if there's anybody from the corporations and the banks listening, there's people in all of your organizations that are involved and want to do more. They just don't know if they'll how to,
Yeah.
and they don't know if they're allowed to. That fear is holding a lot of people back. And so I think that something as simple as a statement saying, we obviously need to create a program around this. Banks do that great. It's not asking you guys to do anything different than you already do. We need to go and acknowledge this as a risk type, and we need to go and start building a basic risk management procedure around it and processes around it, and just identify it as something that doesn't need a lot of resources. But I think having organizations acknowledge that this type of behavior could happen, and I have countless examples of how in our initiatives around child sexual exploitation and human trafficking, these events, people are coming in saying, I didn't think we had any child sexual exploitation on our
Yeah.
books, but now I didn't think I had any human trafficking, but I can't believe we bank these folks. I don't know that it's human trafficking, but I sure am scared about what I'm seeing. And they already have robust money laundering, anti-money laundering controls, and know your customer, and they're identifying things. So I think organizations coming together and just taking a stand and letting their folks know that it's okay to start focusing on protecting people. And let's do it in a structured way. So almost like whether it's an ombudsman role or a person that's going to be a champion or whatever it
Mhm.
be, assigning somebody that has a heart for this to say, hey, let's do this. And off the desk, between the margins, we all have that space. A lot of people want to volunteer to do this. And so I think that's the way that we come together. I always say fighting evil is not competitive. And the other way we have to do this is together.
I love that.
And
That's good for, yeah.
we can be competitive in all aspects of banking, but let's just agree when we talk about protecting people and our customers and our citizens and our children, let's lean in here and help each other. And banks are doing this. This isn't a mystery. I mean, it's amazing how many banks are leading the global fight on child sexual exploitation. I'll just say it. I don't know that it's statistically true, but when I was at the United Nations, I'm hearing about all the organizations and tech companies that aren't doing anything. And I'm sitting here knowing what is happening through the Knoble network and other organizations that are nonprofit. And I'm going, wow, banks are doing amazing. I'm so proud of banking with heart. There's a
Yeah.
lot of bankers out there that have heart.
I love too that you brought up the idea of people thinking, I didn't think we had this in our scope. I didn't know we had this. I read an article last week in the New York Times that was talking about scam mills, especially in parts of Southeast Asia, because I've had people say to me, oh, we're a tech company. We don't have any human trafficking. And you read that article and it's talking specifically about call center support, tech support, and banking scams and financial scams and investment scams that are all being done through these kind of human crime scam mills. And I know Matt Friedman's talked about them as well. So I think the message, the takeaway for me is that I love that fighting evil is not competitive or is not a competitive sport, and that you have risk, even if you don't think you do. It touches these kinds of human crimes, touch everywhere, every company, every supply chain. And if you don't think you have it, you're wrong. And there's opportunity to learn and to join the fight. Become a volunteer, if nothing else.
I 1,000% agree. It's interesting how we learn as a human being. We're all in the essence of human beings. And so when I've helped organizations build fraud programs or convergence, a big topic in our industry was FRAML, fraud and AML, converging them or converging cyber. The best way I found that we learn is through use cases. And so what you just talked about, those scam mills, is a great use case. Child sexual exploitation is a great use case where we can come together and we can try to acknowledge a problem, and then we just figure out how we adjust our defenses collectively. And I think these problems that are real, while they're painful to learn about and they're painful to hear, they've been around for decades. This human trafficking problem is not a new problem. Matt will tell you.
No. Yeah.
We know about it more now because there's people looking, there's exposure of this is good when it gets exposed. Now we can do something about it. And these use cases like these scam mills and the pig butchering issues that are going on and the convergence there, I will tell you, is a wonderful use case. For example, fraud fighters to start working with their anti-money laundering professionals, to start defining scams as a problem, to start understanding the personal impact behind the scam and not just think that the person that's scamming, this is the crazy part about this problem. A lot of people fighting fraud thinks that the fraudsters are bad actors that wear hoods and they're evil people but when you think about the fact that it might be somebody who's being beaten, raped, and tortured to do this against your customer,
Yeah.
it changes the conversation in your mindset. And I know it's not fun to think about, but that's the reality of what we're in. These use cases are powerful. So if we come together in a non-competitive way and start sharing, put the human being at the center, and organizations, we say, we're not going to spend millions, but we're going to even allow our organization, our people to do something about it by expanding their programs. We're going to take FinCEN's guidance and we're just start putting it into action. There's simple things we can do, creating policies. It's not something we don't need to spend millions on tools.
Yeah.
Have the tool. Most of us have the tools. So we just need to go and first of all, make sure it's okay for our employees to do something about it. And secondly, promote it by assigning somebody, a champion within organizations, and get involved with each other.
Thank you so much for your time today. What do people do if they want to learn more about the Knoble, and how do they get in touch with you directly? Can they just email you?
Yeah. So first I would say getting in touch with the Knoble. I try to do orientations for everybody that joins the Knoble. So they hear a little bit of this story, but in more detail. We learn about from each other. It's amazing what I learned about from the people that join the Knoble. I'm doing these sessions every other week. Go to the Knoble.com, Knoble with a K. K is for knights, the Knights of the Round Table, chivalrous, kind of the best things. We're going to fight evil. We're going to do good. Like that's it. The best context, the Knoble, Knoble.com, and go to that and sign up, join the fight. It's free. And you can get involved. You can learn from each other. You can share. We're doing a U.S. Open project this week. You can get involved, and that's working with law enforcement, Homeland Security to detect human trafficking around the U.S. Open. We do these types of initiatives. Come in and learn with people that want to share. It's amazing. The Child Sexual Exploitation Project is launching in a couple weeks. So that's the way that you can get involved. And then my email, ian@theknoble.com. So feel free to send me a note. I'll do the best I can to answer them. I already don't get to enough emails, but I will tell you, I love just hearing about passions that people have. It's inspiration for me because this is the reason I wake up every single day. There's also one more thing I'll tell you is we can choose to hire differently. And I know we need to wrap this up, but I will tell you, I've talked to survivors. I started a company called Mission Omega to help support the Knoble, and we're going to try to hire survivors of human trafficking for fight fraud. And I thought that was a novel idea, but I've been meeting with human trafficking survivors, and I'm so impressed. I'm so impressed with the ones that have found a way through relationships and the recovery journey. They are now unbelievably successful. I was on a conversation with one just a couple weeks ago, blew my mind what she's been able to accomplish. I will tell you, we all need to think about how we can interact and hire. Let's hire differently. That's another way we can get involved. Let's challenge ourselves to look at the human beings and give people new hope in a journey of trying to provide for themselves. So that's my last maybe piece.
That's a great piece. I feel like you buried the lead there, Ian. Hang it. So what's the name of this company? It's the Omega?
So I started a company called Mission Omega.
Mission Omega. Okay.
Mission Omega. We donate 10% of all of our gross revenue to the Knoble because I had a problem keeping the Knoble afloat. So my business partner and I started that. We do fraud consulting, the team does, and then we're starting a new fraud detection unit. And we're working with survivor organizations to hopefully train and equip survivors on how to work detection and fraud investigations. Because what I learned in conversations with some survivors is the recidivism rate, them falling back into trafficking was high because they can't get good jobs. They go work in Walmart. And I'm thinking in fraud, we need good people.
Yeah.
And so we built a training program. The Association of Certified Fraud Examiners is offering it to everyone. We built this training program with them in mind. And our goal is to try to create a world and an environment where we can challenge ourselves on who we hire and restore hope for the future, right? In the process. And so we're challenging ourselves on how we work differently. So not everybody needs to start a nonprofit. You can work in your own lane of whether it's hiring, whether it's policies and programs, you're analytical, whatever it is, you're an investigator. I think that's the part where we need to be not afraid. And you know this, Gwen, you said this at the beginning. We don't need to be experts. I wasn't an expert when I started out. We just need to care enough to ask.
And to leverage the skills you already have for good. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ian. I really appreciate your time. And please, listeners, reach out, find out more, get in touch with Ian, and let's not compete to fight evil. I love that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen.